A new poll shows Joe Biden widening his lead in a key battleground state. A Monmouth University poll released Monday shows that the former vice president now has a 15-point lead over Senator Bernie Sanders in Michigan. Sanders narrowly won that state in 2016. Voters there and in 5 other states will head to the polls Tuesday. Natalie Brand spoke to voters in Michigan ahead of Tuesday's crucial contest.
Thank you.
Senator Bernie Sanders hoping to repeat his success in Michigan 4 years ago.
For our next president, Bernie Sanders.
Held 4 rallies across the state in the final days before Tuesday's vote.
Michigan could be a make or break moment for Sanders. Do you see it that way?
Sure, absolutely. Yep. And I'm hoping that I can make a difference.
Joanne Keeling also backed Sanders in 2016 when he narrowly defeated Hillary Clinton in Michigan's primary in what was considered a major political upset.
I was really sad when he didn't make it, and I'm glad he ran again.
It was time for us to take it back.
But it's former Vice President Joe Biden who enters the next round of contests as the frontrunner and leading in a new Monmouth University poll. To take the temperature of Michigan voters, we headed to Sterling Heights in the heart of Macomb County, known as a key election bellwether.
You have blue-collar workers, you've got small business owners, you've got really every type of voter.
Including coveted crossover voters. Sterling Heights Mayor Michael Taylor is one of them. He voted for President Trump in 2016, but this year he'll be voting in a Democratic presidential primary for the first time.
Who are you voting for?
Joe Biden. He's much more appealing to moderates like myself. He's more appealing to people who maybe are Republicans, generally vote for Republicans, but can't take President Trump anymore.
I want change.
Manal Dababna also voted for President Trump in 2016. She's now backing Sanders.
I believe that insurance should be for all.
While I like Bernie's ideas, health care for all, free college, I'm just not sure that's practical at this point.
While voters here weigh their choices, the results could give a revealing look at what's ahead.
Winning in Michigan means you've made connections with real people about very important issues.
Tuesday's primary offers the first taste of how voters feel in this critical battleground state. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Sterling Heights, Michigan.
So let's bring in Antoine Searight. He's a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist. And he's been saying from the beginning, don't count out Uncle Joe.
And South Carolina.
Right.
Be very clear.
So, Antoine, as we mentioned, Biden leads now in Michigan. But remember, in 2016, it was such a big deal when the polls showed that Hillary Clinton was ahead of Bernie Sanders, and yet Bernie Sanders narrowly won that primary. Could the polls be wrong again?
I'm always consistent when it comes to polls. They are a snapshot of the time, and the devil is often in the details. However, in this scenario, I think the Joe momentum is flowing throughout this primary process. And make no mistake, tomorrow night's contest, not just in Michigan, but for the rest of the contest that will happen tomorrow night, could mean thrive or survive. It could mean thrive for Joe Biden, setting him up for the oh-so-important Florida primary process and other contests going forward. And it could mean survive for Bernie Sanders, who arguably has taken a step backward, considering what happened on last Tuesday night in the consequential Super Tuesday Phase 1 primary process. So tomorrow night will be very telling. What I'm looking for, particularly in Michigan, is the margin of victory by either one of the two who will win, but the type of coalition that it took to win in Michigan. Because as you know, Michigan will be a battleground state going into the general election. And so if enthusiasm is high, voter participation is high, white and black working class voters show up in a real way, that could be an alley-oop for what's to come in the general election.
I want to ask you about that because Biden won a lot of the states that Biden has won so far are states that are not likely to go blue in the general election. Sanders has been winning a lot of those. So if you were advising Sanders in Michigan, given its importance as a battleground state in the general election, what would you be telling him?
I would tell the senator from Vermont to focus on what you know. Go to where your bread is buttered. He knows there are certain segments of the Michigan voting Democratic population that will be strongly for him. He also knows where his weak points are. In a primary election, you have to focus on home base first. You turn out the home base. That's why Joe Biden has been very successful. He knows African-American voters are his strong point. They are the nerve center to his coalition. Therefore, he's been focused on that. And as a result of him focusing on that particular constituency, he's been successful to this point.
So for Sanders, that would be men, that would be young people.
And that would be white working class voters, particularly in a place where he won in 2016, where people did not expect him to win in 2016.
But he confessed that he has not been successful in turning out new voters.
Well, that's when you really have to crank up the energy. You have to put out an extra effort to drive home your message and remind people of what you will bring to the table as a candidate and what people are looking for in this entire primary process. One is a candidate who can defeat Donald Trump, but two, someone who can speak to the hearts and minds of their issues. There are people sitting here, and while we sit here on this set, figuring out how they're going to pay for prescription drugs, how they're going to pay the light bill, whether they can afford to put gas in their car. Those issues hit home, particularly for places in this country where Donald Trump promised them one thing and it's turned out to be another.
Well, let's talk also about some of these endorsements. Biden has been stacking them up. We just heard Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, two senators who were previously competitors of the vice president's, throwing their support behind Biden. How important are these for tomorrow's contest and also for the general election?
These are not just endorsements. These are megawatt endorsements, considering we're starting to see this process collapse or compress to be a battle between arguably the socialist wing of the party and the progressive wing of the party. And we're starting to see that play out in these primary contests, and you cannot turn down the volume of that, what that means for the entire ticket going forward. At the end of the day, when we get a nominee, they have two jobs: one, to unite this party, but two, advocate for a ticket that will be complete in order for us to take this country back.
Any surprise about the Kamala Harris endorsement, given how strong her argument was against the vice president, talking about his previous support against anti-busing?
In this business, you know, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent issues. And what I do know is Senator Harris understands how high the stakes are, and she was so active in the 2018 midterms, just as Vice President Biden. And so she, like him, went to places where Donald Trump won in 16, so she understands the type of message and the type of candidate we need at the top of the ticket to help drive turnout to the bottom of the ticket. So I'm not surprised, and arguably that has been the most consequential endorsement next to Congressman Clyburn, because we all know African-American women are the political booster cables of this Democratic Party.
Clyburn number one, Kamala Harris number two. Either of them potential vice presidential picks? Before you answer that, Biden himself said that he's thought about it, but it would, quote, be presumptuous for me to decide who's going to be vice president. I'm not even the nominee yet. So what do you think, Antoine?
I think it's too early to flirt, play footsie or cuddle with this idea
the back of his
a
head?
VP nominee. But I do think we have to get serious about what the ticket looks like, and the ticket must reflect the demographics of this country, ever-changing demographics, and the needs of this party. I don't see a scenario in which a person of color and or a woman is not on the ticket to augment the experiences and what Vice President Biden brings to the table. Remember, the most important word in this process to this point now is coalition building. And the type of coalition we need in order to defeat Donald Trump and win races up and down the ballot must be reflective of the hearts and minds of this party, but also the changing demographics of this country.
So it's so interesting to see all of the candidates who have dropped out now endorsing Biden. And one candidate who recently dropped out but hasn't endorsed yet is Senator Elizabeth Warren. She was on Saturday Night Live, not completely quiet, mum about who she's going to endorse, but on Saturday Night Live, she appeared. Let's play some of that.
How have you been since dropping out of the race?
You know, I'm doing just fine. My friends and family have been so supportive. They've been calling nonstop, asking, are you okay? What do you need? Were you electable? That kind of thing.
Not endorsing anyone yet?
Well, it's tough. Maybe I'll just pull a New York Times and endorse them both.
All right. And they didn't even have the best part of that, which was the dog in the burrito. But I think a lot of people would have expected Elizabeth Warren to endorse Bernie Sanders because ideologically they are more similar than she is with Joe Biden. Does this indicate some bad blood between them?
I don't think so. I think she understands the gravity of what her endorsement means. I also think she understands in retrospect that her candidacy and her message floats between the Bernie Sanders message and the Joe Biden message. So she's somewhere between pragmatic and progressive. And I think she understands what that means in terms of bringing her supporters into someone's camp. So she's taking her time. I respect that. At the end of the day, whenever she does it, it's so important for her to emphasize the need to bring this party back together for the sake of healing this process. We cannot afford to repeat the sins of 2016 because, as we say in South Carolina, there's no education in the second kick of the mule.
Antoine Searight, thank you.